Amen. That's beautiful. I want to mention quickly, this is my son, Michael, over here. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Reverend Jen Chapman. I am the Director of Intentional Faith Development here. I work primarily with the children and youth, and Michael stepped in unplanned this morning to the liturgist role, so very proud of him. He's doing quite a nice job. Yes. So there's a lot going on in the world right now. Chances are there's a lot going on in your personal lives as well. I found myself this week drawn to watching this reality TV home organization show, Home Edit. Anybody heard of it? I've never watched it before. It's not really my thing, but watching chaotic spaces turned into lovely, tidy, color-coded systems where everything had a place and a purpose really appealed to me this week. In the midst of all the chaos, I found myself longing for some order. It's kind of nice these days if you primarily watch TV through apps like I do. You can very easily avoid ever having to see the news. If you're still a channel surfer, you might accidentally come across footage of Ukrainian children in bunkers or hospitals destroyed by bombs. But not me. I can just go straight to Home Edit and watch someone get a closet makeover. As much as we might want to hide from the news right now, and as much as it definitely is okay and even healthy to watch other things, we can't really escape the reality of what's happening in Ukraine. And there's a lot that can be said about the injustice of that, given the violence, oppression, and war that's happening all over the world, primarily to people of color, that we don't know about or pay any attention to. So I'll just put that truth out there. But nevertheless, what's happening in Ukraine is horrible, and it has our attention. I've really been struggling with this week with how to talk about it, or even how to think about it. But I think our text from the Gospel of Luke has something for us. The passage begins with a threat from Herod, a ruler over Jewish Galilee whose power was tied to the Roman Empire. The message of the threat comes from some Pharisees, some religious leaders, who tell Jesus he'd better move on and leave town because Herod wanted to kill him. Now, the intent of these religious leaders is debatable. Were they genuinely concerned for Jesus' safety, or were they just trying to run him out of town? Either way, they must have had some known connection to Herod, because Jesus tells them to give him a message in return. Go tell that fox. Don't you just love that? I love that. Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. Jesus has a clear message for Herod. And if these Pharisees are part of some kind of scheme to get him out of town, it's a message for them too. I don't have time for this. I have things to do, and I'm not afraid of you. Jesus was on a very clear mission, according to the Gospel of Luke. Remember what he read from the scroll of Isaiah in the synagogue in Nazareth? The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Jesus was traveling through Galilee to Jerusalem, proclaiming the kingdom of God. He seemed to understand that as a prophet, he was not likely to be well received in Jerusalem. He knew that what he was doing and proclaiming was upsetting both religious and political powers, and that his life was in danger. Herod was the least of his worries. Herod may have actually wanted to kill him. He did kill John the Baptist. But Jesus is much more concerned with what's going to happen when he gets to Jerusalem. So let's just pause here and take note of the fact that this is a story that is full of religion and politics. So everyone just take a deep breath. I learned something this week that I hadn't heard before, and I don't think is being talked about a whole lot, but there is a religious dimension to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Diana Butler Bass came and spoke to us here a few years ago. Maybe some of you remember that, and you may have joined her email list as I did then, and if you did, then you may have received the same email that I did this week from her, titled, "War is Evil," subtitled, "So Why Does Religion Inspire It?" It's a provocative title. She writes, "Make no mistake, the war in Ukraine can rightly be seen as a religious war, a specifically Christian, even Orthodox Christian one." Now, I do recommend reading that whole email as well as the articles she links with it, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone who wants it, so let me know. But she goes on to explain and highlight a few important things. Russia and Ukraine are countries where religion and politics are much less separate than they are here. Christian orthodoxy is deeply tied to both their national and political identities. The Russian Orthodox Church, led by the Patriarch of Moscow, self-admittedly views religious nationalism as a hierarchical structure of domination. It's a pyramid structure where all the wealth and power and authority are held by the few at the top. There is no religious freedom. Now, Ukraine seems to have a different version of religious nationalism. They have a Jewish president, for one, and their constitution protects religious freedom. Ukraine seems to be moving toward a more open, tolerant, and less hierarchical version of orthodoxy. Now, the Russian Orthodox Church wants the churches in Ukraine to submit to their authority and to return to a more traditionalist orthodoxy. Last Sunday, the Patriarch of Moscow preached a sermon, by the way, on what they call Forgiveness Sunday, during which he claimed that the fighting in Ukraine was a result of the rejection of fundamental values by those who claim world power. He goes on to explain that these powers demand, this is a quote, translated of course, demand that you hold gay pride parades as a test of loyalty. So what we have here is something that we see at work all over the world right now, including here in the US, especially in places like Texas and Florida. There's a faction fighting for what they see as true Christianity, the most prominent feature of which is being anti-LGBTQ. And their method is authoritarian domination. Diana Butler Bass writes that domination systems, even religious ones, always result in war. But she sees in Ukraine a movement toward an alternative religious structure, not a domination structure focused on control and submission, but a communion structure based on liberation and friendship. And that brings us back to Jesus, who is all about communion, liberation, and friendship, and who exposed and upset the political and religious domination structures of his time. So much so that he knew as he headed toward Jerusalem that he would likely die there. The next part of our passage moves from Herod's threat and Jesus' response to a lament about Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. And you were not willing. Now, as far as we know in Luke, Jesus has not actually been to Jerusalem yet. But he's speaking as someone who embodies the history of the prophets before him and the desires of the heart of God. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. As Jesus prepares to be rejected and possibly even killed by Jerusalem, the city of religious and political power that was supposed to be the city of God, but that was not functioning at all according to God's will. His longing is to gather the people together like a mother hen. A hen? Could Jesus have chosen a more vulnerable animal? Is there any animal lower in the food chain that nurtures its young? I think it's very clear in this image and in the entirety of Jesus' life and death that God's desire, expressed through Jesus, is not to dominate. God's desire is to mother us, to nurture and protect us. Maybe the image of a mother hen needs to become a more prominent image in Christianity. We should rejoice and take comfort in this revelation of God's character and God's true and deep desire in relationship to humanity. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. Under her wings. Are you familiar with the TV show A Handmaid's Tale? Anybody? Maybe a little bit. For those who aren't familiar, you've probably at least seen a poster or a preview with women wearing red, old-fashioned looking cloaks and bonnets. These are the handmaids who have been enslaved with the task of bearing children for the elite who have found themselves barren. It's all wrapped up in a fundamentalist religious political system that's using domination to bring about what the leaders proclaim is God's will. The people of Gilead, if they are rule-following good citizens, or if they want to appear that way, greet one another with the expression, under his eye. The reference is to God, but also reminds the people of the spies and secret police who are watching them on God's behalf. If you've seen the show, or maybe even if you haven't, that expression might make you squirm a little. Under his eye. And yet, it's not an uncommon understanding of God. A God who is watching us in judgment, ready to strike if we step out of line. This is exactly the understanding of God being used today all over the world, including in our own country, to promote religious systems of domination. God is at the top of a triangle with powerful leaders underneath him, and a few powerful leaders under each of them, and so on. God is watching us, and God's will must be carried out, if not by compliance, then by force. These religious systems tend to understand God's will in terms of purity and traditional values. There are strict rules about what is acceptable, clear distinctions about who is in and who is out. And some might say, yeah, that's religion. That's what it is. There's no other way. But I truly believe that Jesus gives us a different vision of who God is and what it can look like for communities of people to believe in and worship God together, to live life together in alignment with God's will. It's right there in the image of the mother hen gathering her chicks. Not under his eye, but under her wings. What if Christians started greeting each other with that expression? Of course, the hard part about being people under her wings is that our mother hen wants to gather us all together under there. The people rejecting Jesus, the religious and political leaders who would team up against him, all those who pledged allegiance to systems of domination, the people turning a profit in the temple, Jesus' enemies. That's who Jesus longed to gather together like a mother hen, along with the poor, the freed prisoners, and the formerly blind. But they were not willing. Are we? Can we even accept this image of God, the mother hen? With everything going on in the world right now, all of these things that feel very far from our control, it might be nice to try it out. To imagine ourselves under her wings, protected, nurtured, loved. So that is my challenge for you this week, for us, to imagine God as often as we can as a mother hen, longing to gather all of humanity under her wings. Perhaps we'll find communion there, friendship, maybe even liberation. Perhaps we'll find our eyes opened to systems of domination closer to home. Maybe systems we're a part of, that we benefit from. And we can begin asking for wisdom on how to faithfully participate in a movement toward communion. Maybe in that loving, nurtured space, gathered under the wings of God, we'll find clarity, like Jesus had, about what is ours to do. And like Jesus, that mission will be so clear, and our trust in God will be so firm that no threat can deter us. We'll tell that fox we're pressing on, knowing that while there may be suffering, the way of God always leads to new life. Under her wings, may it be so. Amen.